let me introduce today's speaker. We have Kate Brierton, and the talk is on the well-being of educators learning the skills of self-compassion. And Kate is a chartered clinical psychologist and trustee of the Eastern Learning Alliance in the UK. I think I've said that correctly. So over to you, Kate.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon, for that introduction. So I hope everyone can see me okay. I'm just going to share my PowerPoint. There we go. So as Simon said, my name's Kate and I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm delighted as always to be asked to speak to you today. It's always a pleasure to speak to educators from across the world, and I was looking at the chat as everyone was kind of logging on and saying that we've got people from all over the world, and at all different times of day. So for some people it's really quite late at night. So thank you so much for making time to join this session, and I hope that you find it worthwhile. My professional role is split into two. Half of my time I kind of run a private clinic in Cambridge, so I'm based in Cambridge, and in my clinic I see all kinds of people facing all different types of challenges in their life across the lifespan really. So I work with teenagers, but I work with people all the way through their life, and I sometimes work with couples and families too. And the other half of my life is about the well-being of teachers and students, cultures in education institutions that can help to promote and support well-being, and actually doing talks and sessions like today to help educators learn how they can support their own well-being. But both of those halves of my professional life are approached through the same perspective. And that's the perspective, the lens of compassion. Compassion is at the heart of everything I do. And that's because I believe that if we just had a little bit more compassion in our lives, in our cultures, in our world, then the world would be a nicer place to live, but also a healthier place to live too. And when I talk about compassion, there are two sides to that too. So there is obviously having compassion for others and being sensitive to the other people around us. But the half that is easily forgotten is compassion for ourselves, self-compassion. Often we are our own worst critics, and we judge ourselves really harshly, and that actually doesn't help us. Although we feel like it might be helping us improve and get better, actually it has the effect of sort of destabilizing our minds and triggering our stress center in our mind. So today's session is to help you start to build and develop your own self-compassion. Let me just, there we go. So what are we going to do today? I'm going to try and make this workshop, as interactive as we can. So we've got some polls, we've got some chat box exercises, and we've got some interactive exercises and meditations that I'm going to invite you to join in with. So quite an interactive session today. I'm going to start off by explaining to you a little bit about how emotions work in the mind. This is something that's not really taught in schools, actually, and I wish it was taught more, because I think it's really helpful to understand how your emotions work and how your brain kind of works, and what emotions are for, and the evolutionary background to emotions. That can be a really helpful understanding. And then I'm going to focus on the threat system, because the threat system in the mind is where our stress kind of is generated and comes from. And I'm going to demonstrate to you and invite you to have a go at a particular breathing technique, which actually helps to calm our threat system down. So it calms our physiology in the moment. And that's a really handy technique to learn, because of course you take breathing everywhere. So you can use this technique wherever you are, whatever point in your life, in your daily lives. We're then going to cultivate self-compassion by thinking about how life experiences shape and mold us. And often we don't choose those life experiences, particularly the ones that happen to us when we're younger. So we're going to pause and reflect on that. And then I'm going to also talk to you about the tricky brain. our brains are amazing. I mean, we are just the most amazing species. And in neuroscience terms, you know, the brain is just the most amazing piece of equipment. But often what people don't know is that actually they can also be quite tricky to manage. And that's due to the way that they've evolved and kind of the way the brain is structured. So I'll talk to you in detail about that later on. A little bit about self-criticism. I mentioned that, didn't I? That we can be our own worst critics, and that's not really helpful to our well-being. So a little bit about that. And then also, again, building on that self-compassion, really reminding you of how teaching is quite a difficult job. And I am in admiration of everybody in education. And I'm going to explain why. You are all my heroes. And then lastly, I'm going to talk to you about the benefits of meditation. Meditation isn't just one thing. There's lots of different styles of meditation, lots of different types, but there are huge benefits to starting a meditation practice. And right at the end of the session, we're actually going to experience, hopefully, a benefit from a meditation exercise called the Calm Place. And again, I'm going to invite you to take part in that one as a group if you'd like to do that. So that's what we're going to cover. But before we get into it, I'm going to ask you to do one thing, and I'm going to invite you to set an intention to do one thing differently to support your well-being after you've listened to my workshop, and set an intention to build that into your everyday life. And you can see here I've got my lovely picture of sunflowers. I absolutely adore sunflowers. But to me, it's more than just a picture. It's a metaphor for every bit of my work. And I use it with everybody I work with, because a sunflower is a tall, beautiful, majestic flower, but it grows from a very, very tiny seed. And to me, that's a really nice metaphor to help us remember that just small changes can make a big difference. And that is so true for well-being. Quite often, for example, if I talk to you about starting a meditation practice, even before we've begun, you might start to feel a bit overwhelmed by that. And it's like, oh, I don't have enough time in my life already. I'm really busy. How am I going to fit that in? But if I say to you, hey, look, I'm not talking about meditating for 2 hours a day or even an hour a day. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to ask you to start with 10 minutes. Start with 10 minutes meditation a day, and I practically guarantee that's going to make a huge difference to your well-being. So that's what I mean. I'm being realistic, I'm being pragmatic, but I really would like you to set that intention to try one thing, to do one thing differently as a result of joining this session. So we have our first poll. I'm really keen to know more about you, and particularly to find out how you are right now today. So I'm going to invite you to take part in this poll, which is all about how your well-being's been for the past 7 days. So I've got a nice scale here from 0 to 10, very, very simple. So 0 to 3 is kind of you've not been very good. So maybe you've been very anxious or stressed, or maybe you've been feeling quite low, quite down. 4 to 7 is kind of medium levels of well-being. You kind of been going okay, you know, it's fine, it's not great, but it's fine. And then the final category is 8 to 10. So you've really been flourishing over the past 7 days. You've felt great, you've been thriving. And if you could just run that poll for me now, I think we've got somebody in the background that can set that going. Now, I can't see that poll, is it?
No, we can't see the poll just yet. We are getting in the chat box, we are getting people putting A, B, or C.
Fantastic. Oh, there we go. Yay. Now we can see it. Brilliant. So if people could fill that in. And I'm just really interested. I tend to do this poll every time I speak now, because it gives me an idea of how people are feeling in the room. And it's also just interesting for me to see how different groups compare. It also gives you a chance to stop and reflect on this, because quite often we don't do that. Quite often we're so busy that we don't give ourselves a chance to kind of check in with ourselves and really reflect on how we are. And it is important to do that every now and again. Okay, how are we doing? Shall we we'll just have a few more seconds, maybe 10 more seconds, and then close the poll and publish. Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that now. So we've got about 17% of people here in the audience today are not feeling very good, maybe feeling quite stressed, anxious, maybe feeling a bit down. So hopefully today will really be of help for you. And then this is actually the pattern I normally see, I typically see. Most people in the room are kind of in that middle group. Things are kind of okay, you know, you can function, you're feeling okay, it's not great, but you're feeling okay. And then the flip side, it's funny, is we've got exactly 17% at the other end of the spectrum, with levels of 8 to 10, and you're kind of really thriving and flourishing, and that's brilliant to hear. Okay, thank you very much. So let me explain to you a little bit about how emotions, sorry, just gone forward on my slides there, about how emotions actually work in the mind, just that you start to understand your emotional states. And once you've got to grips with this model, you can actually, again, throughout the day, start to think, which system, emotional system, am I mostly in right now? And that's actually a good way to be able to check in with yourself about well-being. So, for obvious reasons, the model in front of you on the slide is called the 3 circles model. Okay, so that's not a very original name, but this is the 3 circles model. I use it in all of my work. I use it with all of my clients, but I also use it to think about cultures and educational cultures too. I'm going to go through each system one by one and just explain to you what it feels like to be in this system, the kind of evolutionary background to this system. So why did it evolve? What's its purpose? And then a bit at the end about what it means to be healthy in terms of this model. So let's start with the blue circle. Let's start with the drive system. So the drive system is our motivational system. Okay, it's what helps us get out of bed and basically function all day. In an evolutionary terms, this was our resource seeking system. So this is a system that used to motivate us to go out and hunt for food, go and seek shelter, go and find a partner so that we could reproduce and pass on our genes to the next generation. All of that is kind of drive system based. So in the modern world, this most easily translates, I guess, into our working world, where we have goals that we're focusing on, we're working hard and we're making progress towards those goals. And when we achieve those goals, it feels great, doesn't it? It feels fantastic. So if you cast your mind back to the last time there was some big project at work or something you were working towards and it came off, you worked hard towards it, it was successful. How did that feel? And this is the same feeling we get when we pass an exam, when we do an assignment really well, maybe even passing your driving test, that kind of feeling. And normally what people say to me is it feels kind of buzzy. It's an excited kind of feeling. There's vitality there. It's a buzzy, kind of energetic feeling. That's very much drive system. But then I will say to people, how long does that feeling last? It's a great feeling. I love the drive system. It's one of my favorite systems. It's a great feeling, but how long does it last? And my clients will say to me, oh, maybe a few hours, like maybe a day or 2 if I'm lucky, and then I lose that feeling and I just feel like how I normally do. And that's exactly right. The drive system can trick us into thinking once we've achieved our goal, we're going to feel fantastic forever, for the rest of our lives. But actually what happens is it resets. And it resets quite quickly. You know, it normally resets within a day. So you might win the lottery. You know, you win the lottery, and studies have been done on winners of the lottery. But actually, after a day or 2, you know, they feel fantastic when they win. But after a day or two, they just feel the same as they ever did. They lose that excited feeling. It makes sense in evolutionary terms because it needed to reset, because this was a system that made us go out and hunt every day, that made us seek shelter every day. So it has to reset every day. But it can be tricky to say it almost, I think it sells us a lie. It tricks us into thinking that we're going to be happy forever. And because it only lasts such a short time, it's important in our lives. Of course, the drive system is totally necessary. We need meaning in our lives. We need a purpose. We need to be moving in a certain direction. But it's not a good basis for our entire well-being, because we lose that feeling so quickly. And also it's a very energetic system. So if it runs away with us, we can often burn out because it consumes so much energy. Let's come down to the threat system now, the red circle. And I think normally this is when I talk to people, this is the one that people most readily identify with. This is where our anxiety and our anger comes from, our like stress response. And the threat system is all about keeping us safe from danger. In evolutionary terms, it's really quite an old system. So, reptiles, even insects have a kind of primitive version of this system. Reptiles certainly do. So they actually have a freeze response, which sometimes humans can experience because we still have a reptilian part of our mind. So when they're frightened, quite often things like lizards will actually just freeze and play dead. And that's actually the threat response. So they've sensed a danger, and the whole physiology is taken over by the threat system. That's what happens. And they freeze and they play dead. In humans, sometimes we get a freeze response, but actually we're much more likely to get a fight or flight response. And that comes from our stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And I'm quite sure it doesn't take you long to think back to a time where you were really anxious or really panicky or really worried about something, and you get a sense of what that feels like in the body. It's a really uncomfortable feeling. This is what we call an aversive emotional system. The emotions you feel are designed to make you move away from whatever's causing you that distress and that discomfort and keep you safe. And the other thing to know about the threat system is that it's really sensitive. And that's not our fault. Evolution has made it sensitive. And we sometimes say it's a bit like a smoke detector that goes off just when you're making toast. It's that sensitive. So the slightest threat can trigger our threat systems. And then coming up last but not least, my favorite system of all, the soothing system, the green circle here. This system is the basis of all good, safe relationships. And we have to remember, and it's easily forgotten, that humans are a social species, and this has evolved into the structure of our mind. And the soothing system is all about that. This is the system that helps us live and bond in social groups. It helps us care for our young for long, long periods of time. So I have an 18-year-old in my house. My daughter's 18. I've been caring for her for 18 years, a tremendous amount of time and effort. And that's evolved into humans. That's now our reproductive strategy to care for our young, as it is for all mammals. So all mammals have this soothing system. And when this system is operating, we tend to feel contented, we feel safer, we feel like protected by the others in our social group, we feel cared for, we feel that we can trust the people around us, and that they trust us. It's a nice system, it's a nice feeling, but it's different to drive. So drive is like buzzy and excited. Soothing is much more kind of warm and relaxed and safe. And so if you imagine when you've spent time with your best friend or a close partner, maybe imagine if you give somebody a hug or you hold someone's hand, that will remind you of what it feels like to be in this system. The hormone involved is oxytocin, and we often psychologists call oxytocin the cuddle hormone, the hug hormone, because we actually get a burst of it when we have physical contact with someone that makes us feel safe. We get a burst of oxytocin. We also get that when we stroke animals too. So pet owners have a burst of oxytocin every time they stroke their cat or their dog. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we've all had problems with this system, because a lot of people in the pandemic were separated in some way from friends and family, and we were all very isolated, particularly during the lockdown periods, and that meant we were kind of oxytocin deficient. That's an issue because we need oxytocin for our well-being, and a particular quality of oxytocin is that it calms down our stress response. So it calms down the threat system, the red circle here. And this is how our mind works. This is the structure, and this is how it's evolved. For emotional health, we need the three systems, the three circles here, to be roughly the same size in our lives. And we need to be able to move in and out of each system throughout our days as we need to. So we need a threat system. If there's a danger around us, a threat to us, we do need to react to that. We also need a direction, a meaning, and a purpose in our life, the drive system. And we also need safe and protective relationships, both friendships, relationships at work, community relationships, as well as relationships with our partners and with our family. But typically, what I see nowadays, and I think our culture, the 21st century cultures play into this, is that in the clinic, I will see big threat systems. I will often see a really big drive system, or sometimes somebody has worked so hard, they've burnt out, and actually their drive system has shrunk to be quite tiny, to be small. So we either see a big drive system or a small drive system. And I see small soothing systems, because we're all driven these days, and there's lots of pressure, and particularly for you as educators, you will recognize this. There's lots of pressure to be productive and to work long hours, and often that's at the expense of our relationships. And this is not good for our emotional health. And this is why I believe we have some of the highest rates of anxiety and depression and mental health disorders that we've had in a very long time. So those are the three circles. Coming back to stress and the threat system, really important to know that it's not just in the mind. And this kind of goes for all of those systems, but particularly for the stress system. Stress and threat are a whole body experience. So as I'm talking through this slide, I'd really love it if you could put in the chat box where you tend to feel stress in your body. If you're happy to share, that would be great, because everybody's slightly different. So you can see on my diagram here that there's all kinds of places in which stress can affect us. That adrenaline and the cortisol can affect us. So for me particularly, I tend to feel stress in my kind of tummy area, my stomach area. I tend to feel sick when I'm stressed. I might get butterflies in my stomach. I also tend to get quite stiff kind of shoulders. My kind of shoulders go up, and I hold a lot of tension up here when I've got a lot of stressful things going on in my life. So where do you feel stress in the body? And if you could put that in the chat, I'm just going to have a look at some of your answers now. Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so somebody else feels tension in their muscles, the stomach, and a dry mouth. That's right, stress hormones can dry our mouth. They can pause our salivary response. A lot of people like me feeling it in the stomach. Head, yeah, so headaches are a frequent consequence of stress, migraines. That's right. So someone mentioned palpitations and a really fast heart rate. The stress response, adrenaline, speeds up our heart rate because it's getting us ready to take preventative action. So all of this is trying to help us. Heart, somebody else experiencing in their heart. And then someone else feeling nauseous. Brilliant. Thank you very much for putting those answers in the chat. So I just wanted to highlight there that, when we say we're stressed out and we're feeling stress, it's not just in the mind, it is a whole body experience. And it's important to pay attention to that, because not only can high levels of stress make us emotionally and mentally unwell, they can make us physically unwell too. So it is important to pay attention when we're feeling these signs of stress. So on to my first kind of group exercise now. The good news about the stress response is that we can actually take action to calm ourselves down in the moment. And this is by learning a technique of breathing that's called soothing rhythm breathing. The other thing that's really exciting, and there's research coming through all the time about this now, if you practice this kind of breathing, maybe 2-3 times a day, again, it doesn't have to be for hours, just for minutes at a time, it actually changes something called heart rate variability, which is a measure of stress resilience in the body. So it's a physiological measure, and it indicates how resilient we are to stress in our body. So in other words, this type of breathing helps us feel emotionally calm, but also calms down our whole physiology and helps to counteract some of those harmful physical effects. So I'd like to invite you to experience this now. Please only do this if you're comfortable doing so and it's safe to do so. The best way is to sit in a chair. And I always say to people, prepare the body to help the mind in all of my exercises. So we just open our body out. So we open our chest area at the top here, and we make sure our shoulders are nice and soft. Okay. Now the breathing technique is about breathing in through the nose and then out through the mouth for 2 beats longer, because it's on the exhalation response, the exhalation part of the breath, that we get the relaxation response we're looking for. It actually turns on our parasympathetic nervous system, which calms down the sympathetic side of our nervous system, which is where the stress response is happening. So I'm going to talk you through it. Feel free to close your eyes while we're breathing if you feel comfortable to do that. I always close my eyes. It's a habit. I'm just used to doing it that way. Or if not, just rest your gaze softly in front of you. And I'm going to invite you by starting with a rhythm that's 4-6. So we're going to breathe in through the nose for 4 and out through the mouth for 6. And I'm going to count for you. So breathing in through the nose now. And out through the mouth for 6. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Now we're going to try a rhythm that's longer. We're going to try a rhythm that's 5-7. This is my favorite rhythm. So breathing in through the nose for 5. And out through the mouth for 7. In for 5. Out for 7. In for 5. Out for 7. And then just keep breathing in that way. If at all you'd start to feel uncomfortable or it doesn't feel okay for you, then please just stop and return to your regular, comfortable method of breathing, way of breathing. But for everyone else, keep going, choosing which of those rhythms felt the best to you. So was 4-6 better, or 5-7? If you want to stretch it a bit further, you can try breathing in for 6 and out for 8 if you've got a large lung capacity. With nice, slow, long out breaths. And on every out breath, allowing yourself to find some ease. Allowing your body to soften. Not forcing, but just seeing whether you can let some of the stress and tension in your body go on every out breath. Breathing in, calm and peace. Breathing out, stress and tension. Breathing in, calm and peace. Breathing out, stress and tension. And then we're going to take one more breath in this way before drawing the exercise to a close, allowing our breathing to return to its normal, regular, comfortable rhythm. The body knows how to breathe. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes and coming back into the workshop. So, what I would really love to hear from you is how that went, how that was for you. So again, if you can write in the chat box, kind of what did you experience with that breathing? Which of the rhythms did you like the best? I'm always 5-7 was always the one for me, but a lot of my clients prefer 4-6. Did you feel anything different in your body? Did your mind feel any different? And I'm just going to have a look at what you're putting in. Okay, 4-6, a lot of 4-6s. Good, relaxing, brilliant. A lot of people finding it relaxing. I'm a psychologist, by the way. Somebody asked whether I was a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I'm a psychologist. Sleepy. So if you're doing that exercise, you're not going to like this. If you're doing that exercise and you feel sleepy afterwards, so it's good to feel relaxed. That's exactly what we're looking for. But if you're feeling sleepy as a result, it probably means you're a little bit short on sleep and you're a little bit sleep deprived. And don't worry, that's very common in our busy lives, but it might be time to have a few early nights and to try and catch up on sleep. I did actually once have a client fall asleep on my sofa in my office in front of me, and I had to, when I did that exercise with her, and I had to actually wake her up. So you're not the only one if you're feeling sleepy. Okay, so the brilliant thing about that breathing exercise is you can take it anywhere. I do this, like I've done this on trains. I particularly like to do it before presentations because I get a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious before I present. So I'm often there just doing a few soothing rhythm breaths before I present. You can take it with you everywhere. And as I say, if you practice this type of breathing regularly, it changes your physiology, it changes your heart rate variability. And there's science on that, okay? There is proper research on this. So please do try and incorporate that into your lives if you can. Right, okay, so moving back into cultivating a compassionate mind. As I said at the beginning, we're often our worst critics. We judge ourselves so harshly. And actually, if we can just build a little bit of self-compassion by cultivating a compassionate mind, it can help our well-being tremendously. And there are certain things that a compassionate mind really understands. And I'm hoping by the end of the day, you'll kind of understand these two. First thing is that emotions are powerful. They're really powerful. They're designed to be powerful. They're how our brain kind of keeps us alive and keeps us functioning. And you know, they all have a purpose. As we work through the systems, you could see that they all have a purpose, an important purpose, and that they're whole body responses. We don't choose how we feel. Emotions are like a reflex. So never judge yourself for how you feel. And I don't care, even if it's one of the like more unpleasant emotions, even if it's shame or it's jealousy or envy or anger, please don't be ashamed of that, because you can't help it. You feel how you feel. The trick is to respond to that emotion in a helpful way. And we can choose our responses. Okay, and we choose responses which are helpful to us and helpful to the people around us. But never judge yourself for the way you feel. We are shaped by life. I've got a slide on that in a moment, and I'm going to ask you about what has influenced your lives, what's shaped and molded you. And we have tricky brains. Again, I'm going to explain that in a moment. But a really nice phrase, my favorite phrase on this slide is, we are human. We're human. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. Sometimes the best learning comes from the mistakes that we make. So it's fine not to be perfect. We're just human. And because I'm talking to educators today, what you do is difficult. And we're going to cover that in a slide, but that's another reason to have compassion for yourself. What you do is difficult and you're doing a really, really good job. Shaped by life. We are shaped and molded by all of the experiences that we have in one way or another. I would like you to use this time, the next 2 to 3 minutes, to just really pause, and as I'm talking, reflect on your own life and reflect on what has shaped you. Okay, what have been a really sort of transformative experiences? What has influenced you in your life? And if you're happy to share that in the chat box, that would be great. Obviously, everybody in the group can see what you put, so please only share things that you're comfortable to share. And if you could be doing that just while I talk you through this slide. So I've split the types of experiences that we have by the age that we have them into childhood experiences and adult experiences. And that's really because as a psychologist and a psychotherapist, I do believe that what happens to us in our childhood is really fundamental to who we become later on. That doesn't mean we can't change, because if I didn't think people could change, then I wouldn't do my job. I wouldn't be any good, would I? Because what I try to do is work with people's minds and help them to change so that they can be healthier and make healthier choices and feel, you know, high levels of emotional well-being. But childhood definitely affects us, and all these different things that we experience in childhood. What I want you to notice is we don't choose any of them, particularly in childhood. I mean, some of the things that happen to us as adults, we don't choose either. But for children, they don't choose the culture they're born into, and yet that has a massive effect on them in terms of their beliefs about how they should be and how the world should be. We don't choose the way we're parented, and yet definitely that has an effect on us. You know, whether we receive the right kind of nurturing, whether we have financial kind of stability and access to resources growing up, all of that, you know. But we don't choose that. We don't choose the family we're born into or the parents that we have. We don't choose the school we go to most of the time. Most children, most young people don't choose their school. We don't choose their gender, and there's huge differences in what we expect from different genders still, I think, in the world, and the way that they're treated. We don't choose our socioeconomic level, and we certainly don't choose the traumatic things that can sometimes happen to us in childhood that really do have a profound effect on the way we see the world. And even as adults, there are lots of experiences to have that shape and mold us to the career that we go into, society, world events. And of course, then when I was writing this slide, I was thinking of the pandemic and how that's all shaped us. Everybody is starting to feel a little bit more threatened. Perhaps everybody is a lot more aware of their health. Everyone, I think, or I feel a lot of people are very cautious now about connecting with people socially and being in the same space with people. COVID has dramatically shaped and influenced us, and we didn't choose it. Nobody would have chosen to experience a pandemic. I'm just now going to have a look in the chat box and see what kinds of things everyone in the audience today. World events, yeah. Career, yeah, it does shape us, really does shape us. The social environment around us, yep, so important. Someone there had some adverse childhood experiences. I'm very sorry about that. Grief, yeah, so absolutely. So losing someone close to us at any stage of life really shapes our psychology and affects us from, really in a profound way. So these things shape us, they mold us, and yet we don't choose them. And it's really important then that we are compassionate to ourselves instead of judging ourselves. The other thing that people often don't know about is that we have tricky brains. I'm just going to briefly explain this to you. I want to leave time for our final exercise today, the meditation exercise, but let me briefly explain to you about the tricky brain. So the first thing to remember, no one sat down and designed the structure of the brain. The brain has evolved over hundreds and thousands of years. And as you can see, as I've already mentioned, we have some really quite primitive parts of our brain. The reptilian brain there is responsible for a lot of our brainstem reflexes. Then in the middle, we have the limbic part of our brain, and that's where our emotional and kind of feeling centers are. So this is where the emotions in the brain mostly sit. And this limbic system, particularly involved in mammals, as I explained, that's where the caring response came about in evolutionary history. But on top of that, we have another layer of our brains, and this size of this layer is unique to human beings, okay? This is our cortex, or neocortex, which literally means new cortex. And in human beings, it's massive. We have the biggest neocortex of all the species. And it's this part of the brain that allows us to do all of the really complex cognitive tasks that we do. This is where we find planning, problem solving, creativity, imagination, all of the wonderful things which allow me today on a sunny afternoon in Cambridge to be talking to educators from around the world. That technology was invented by the neocortex, by the human neocortex here. It's amazing, but it has a downside. And the downside is the way it can trigger our emotional brains, and particularly the stress centers. When you think about it, we have language, yeah, which is great because that means we can communicate in groups and collaborate in groups and achieve great things. But because we have language, we have thoughts. And we can think our way into stress. So we have the capacity to imagine what might go wrong in the future. And that's where anxiety comes from. It's our mind trying to predict what might go wrong. And we have the capacity to dwell on what has gone wrong in the past. And rumination like that is typically seen in the depressive mind states. No other species has the capacity to do that. If you imagine a herd of zebra grazing on the African plains, along comes a lion, and one zebra notices, and it triggers all of the threat systems of the whole herd. So one zebra will put up its head and react to the lion coming around the corner. The whole herd react. They get a burst of adrenaline, that stress hormone, from their threat system, and they run. And they run away from the lion, and there's clouds of dust, and they run maybe 4 or 5 kilometers further along the plain. Hopefully the lion doesn't catch them. What are the zebra doing 10 minutes later? And the zebra are calmly grazing on the plain. They are not stressed. They are fine. They are back actually in their green soothing system because they're surrounded by members of their herd. If that was a group of human beings, what would they be doing? Okay, so a group of human beings see a lion and they get chased by a lion. 10 minutes down the line, the human beings are still stressed because they're worrying about where did the lion come from? How can I defend myself? Is there going to be another lion? How can I solve this problem? And that is unique to the human species. And this also, because we have language and because we have thought, we can also criticize ourselves. If we didn't have language and thought, then we wouldn't have the ability to engage in self-criticism. And a lot of the clients that I work with engage in self-criticism, and it triggers the threat response. So things like worrying about whether people don't like you. A lot of people, will say to themselves, I'm not likable, people don't like me, I'm not good enough. A lot of people worry that they're ugly or they're unattractive. All of those different kinds of self-criticisms trigger the threat response. And this is absolutely not our fault. And I don't think it's like an intentional part of the mind. It's almost like a side effect of having these wonderful neocortexes that can do amazing things. But unfortunately, we can imagine threat. And that means we can maintain our levels of cortisol and adrenaline for long periods of time. And that's not good for our physical health, really not good for our physical health. So what can we do about that? Oh, one last thing before we get onto that. Another reason you need self-compassion. Why is teaching difficult? Okay. Teaching is a really difficult job. I mean, I could do a whole presentation just on this, really, couldn't I? And I suppose I need to spend a long time on this slide because you all know this because you're working in education. So don't get me wrong, teaching is also, I reckon, apart from my job, which I find very rewarding, I think teaching must be one of the most rewarding professions in the world. And I think you're amazing because I think it's actually one of the most important professions in the world. Alongside medical and healthcare, I think teaching and education is fundamentally important to everyone, and it's a fundamental right. But there are difficult parts to it. You have emotional labor in teaching, so you're supporting your own emotions in the classroom or the lecture theatre, but also the emotions of the people around you. You've got so many stakeholders that are making demands on you. We've got this really, at the moment in our culture, there's really kind of this emphasis on outcomes and performance and competitions between institutions. And all of that triggers our stress system, but also triggers our drive system. And we get caught between threat and drive. And that's what can really generate burnout. And we have one of the highest rates of burnout that we've ever seen in the teaching profession right now. You're under constant scrutiny. Again, it triggers your threat system, high workload, you're just exhausted, and education systems are under-resourced, right? So please don't judge yourself harshly. You are doing a brilliant job in sometimes really difficult circumstances. So whenever that self-critic pipes up and it tells you, you're useless or you're not doing a good job, I want you to remember Kate said, you are doing a fantastic job. You are doing an amazing job, and especially in the shadow and the shadow of the pandemic, where obviously everything got difficult, and it got particularly difficult for teachers. And I don't think that's been recognized enough worldwide. So teaching is difficult. Please don't judge yourself. Treat yourself with compassion. Be kind to yourself. Okay, we've got another poll here. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to skip this. I'm going to skip this just because otherwise I'm going to run out of time, and I do want to do the last exercise with you. So apologize for that. I'm kind of running over my time here. I want to talk to you about meditation. Because if you do one thing differently, do you remember I said at the start, try and do one thing differently as a result of talking to me. If you do one thing, I suppose I would really encourage you to start a meditation practice. Meditation has so many benefits. There's lots of different types of meditation and lots of different styles. It's a whole world out there. So please do go away after this and research all of that. But it changes your physiology. It helps you change emotional state. It helps you see how your mind is working. So with meditation, you start to be able to see these thoughts that can be so bothersome. You start to see them as like mental events rather than as part of you. And that's actually really helpful for well-being. You start to identify less with those thoughts, fuse less with those thoughts. And also with emotions too, it helps you to check in and just find out kind of what emotional state you're in. And it helps you to see that emotions are things that pass through us. And in meditation, you can actually learn techniques which help you to allow the emotions to flow through you so that you don't feel you have to resist them quite so much. And a good way to start is a smartphone app. There are lots of good apps out there. The ones that I have personally tried and enjoyed are 10% Headspace and Calm, but there are lots of apps out there and they're really good because they guide you through, and often there are beginners courses that you can do 10 to 15 minutes a day. 10 to 15 minutes a day can really help. We're going to end the session today with one of my own meditation exercises that I do with clients, and this comes from compassion focused therapy, which is the approach that I apply when I'm working with people clinically. And this is the meditation I start with, and we're just going to do, and we'll just do 5 minutes because I do want to allow some time for questions at the end. It's called A Calm Place, and it's a visualization meditation exercise. So again, if I can invite you to take part in this and prepare the body to help the mind. So sitting in a chair, opening the chest area, just softening the shoulders. And if you feel comfortable to do so, just closing your eyes. Take a couple of breaths like we did with the soothing rhythm breathing. So breathing in through the nose and then a nice, slow, long out breath. So we start to calm our physiology down to help us prepare for the exercise. So in through the nose. And then a nice long out breath. And then we're going to move our focus up into our minds and up into our imaginations. And we're going to bring to mind our calm place. This can be a real place that you've actually visited in real life, or it can be a place that you create in your imagination. But it is somewhere where you can feel completely calm and relaxed and safe. In this place, there are no demands upon you. It's a very safe place. It's a place where you would like to be and where you enjoy spending time. So I want you to imagine you're standing in the middle of that place and you're looking all around you. And just notice what you can see in your mind's eye. Look at what you can see. So if you're outside, you might notice what color the sky is today in your calm place. You might notice whether there are clouds in the sky. Noticing whether there are trees, and if there are trees, what color are the leaves? If you're inside, you might notice pictures and paintings around you on the wall. You might notice the color of the wall, fabrics and furnishings, really tuning into colors and shapes and forms. And then I want you to imagine what you might hear in this place. So what sounds belong here? So if you're outside, you might hear the wind blowing through the trees. There might be bird song, maybe the sound of water, either the waves on a beach, or maybe the sound of a river or a stream running by. If you're inside, it might be the ticking of a clock, Maybe you can hear other people in the rooms around you chattering, maybe the hum of music. And then I want you to find somewhere in this calm place where you can imagine sitting or lying down, just relaxing, letting all of that stress and tension go. And as you sit and lie down, just imagine extending your hand out beside you. And imagine what you would feel under your fingertips. So if you're outside, it might be grass, might be water in the stream running beside you. It might be sand. And just notice whether the sand is warm, dry, whether it's cool and damp. If you're inside, it might be the fabric of a favorite chair, or maybe the softness of a blanket or duvet. And just spend a moment appreciating this feeling of relaxation, taking your time. And then when you're ready, standing up in your calm place and taking one last look around at everything you can see, taking in everything you can hear. And then as we draw the exercise to a close, we're going to let the image start to fade, start to dissolve, but knowing we can bring back this sense of relaxation, this sense of calmness, just by picturing, imagining ourselves here again. But for now, letting it go, coming back into the here and now, maybe focusing our attention on our feet and the contact that the feet make with the ground. And when you're ready, opening your eyes again and coming back into the session. So I hope that you found the Calm Place helpful. If you'd like a slightly longer version available completely for free, I have a recording that I send out to all my clients that's on my website there, Compassionate Cambridge. If you just Google Compassionate Cambridge, it will come up, and it's under meditations and exercises. And please feel free to use that as much as you want, as much as you find helpful. Okay, so just a reminder, here comes Simon. Just a reminder, please do one thing differently and have a think now about what that's going to be. And I think it's question time, isn't it? Have we got time just for just one or two questions, Simon? I know I overran a bit.
Yeah, I think we've only got 1 minute left. But okay. But thank you very much. Just as a summary, that there's been, I don't think I've ever seen the chat box so busy.
Okay, good.
I don't even know where to start, but it's definitely a topic, as I mentioned in the previous talk, it's an area that people really wanted to hear more about. And it's evident that it's appreciated when it happens. And I should have said at the beginning, you know, this isn't just a regular talk about critical thinking or something. This is a little bit different. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted people just to experience this and to see what they thought. And the comments, I don't know if you want to scroll back at all, but you can just see hundreds of comments of positivity.
That's brilliant. And you know, if people do have any questions about anything, if you look on my website, my emails, that people are very welcome to email me. I'm always happy to correspond with people in education.
Excellent. I just, one quote that you gave, you can take your breathing anywhere with you. I quite like that one.
Yeah. And it's a good job that we do.
You can do this kind of thing anyway. People say, like a lot of people said, you know, can we do this with our students in the class? And I just think, why not? You know,
absolutely. Particularly the breathing. The breathing is great because it's simple, it's straightforward. If you do 2-3 minutes at the beginning of a class, you'll find it will really focus and orientate your students. The only thing you have to check out is do make sure, you know, tell them if they start to feel at all uncomfortable, then it's okay just to sit back and breathe normally. But for most people, it works really well to just calm and kind of focus us.
Yeah, no, that's been excellent. I think, yeah, you know, self-compassion. We've got to start thinking about all the good things we do, and not focusing on all the bad. I think that's what I'm going to take away from this anyway.
Yeah.
So thanks very much. I think that